So it's not often that Caitlin Clark does a long sit down interview. And therefore, there's going to be plenty of content that comes from that, especially in a WNBA offseason that's essentially endless, right? And she was on New Heights with Travis and Jason Kelsey, and I've already shared a few clips. This may be the last one, but I also thought this one was worthy because there's a specific thing she mentioned when talking about choosing Iowa over Notre Dame that stuck out to me. It stuck out to me about what her competitive spirit is like and the kind of things that wire Caitlin Clark. And that's a part of her legend, right? Her growing legend as she moved from Iowa to the WNBA and has become the most prominent women's basketball player in the history of the sport. But apparently she was choosing between Iowa and Notre Dame. And she detailed that decision when joining the Kelsey brothers and when she was obviously asked about that specifically. Here's what she said.
It's funny.
How did you end up at Iowa? You almost ended up at Notre Dame.
I did, yeah.
What led
nice.
to the decision to go to Iowa?
So I basically narrowed it down pretty early on when I was going through my college recruitment that I wanted to be like in the Midwest, just kind of a homebody, family person, just wanted to stay fairly close to home. So that narrowed a lot of stuff down. And I visited like Oregon and Texas and a few other places, and I liked them, but it was just like I knew it was too far. And then visited Notre Dame a bunch of times. And I was like, I love Notre Dame. And I like, as a kid, like you want to go to Notre Dame. Like it's the same with Notre Dame football. It's like the coolest thing in the world. Like it's Notre Dame. It has that tradition. They've had so many great players go through there in every single sport. But like, I just knew like something like you could just like, I could feel it in my gut. Like I was like, I'm not supposed to go there.
Yeah.
So I picked Iowa, and Iowa was really good at women's basketball before I went there too. Like made a few Sweet 16s, made the Elite Eight. Our coach had been there for quite a while, but they hadn't been to the Final Four since like 1992. So I wanted to go somewhere that was good, but like maybe hadn't been like a blue blood per se in like quite a few years, and kind of help them get back to that. And then it was obviously my home state too, and 2 hours from where I grew up. So perfect distance where like your parents can't show up, but also like you could go home if you wanted to.
No doubt.
Of course.
No doubt.
Yeah.
It's important.
It just kind of all worked out perfect. And obviously I made an okay decision and it worked out pretty well, but
worked out real well.
Yeah, it did.
Did you take visits to?
So she did take visits to the schools and everything, but hearing her detail it that way, obviously there's the close to home part, and that's not insignificant. And the relative distance, that's something I've heard college people talk about before, close enough to home, but not too close to home. But the part that stood out to me is that she wanted to go somewhere that was good, but not a blue blood or not a dominant program, and sort of build it up herself. That speaks to her individuality and her competitive spirit. And it also probably speaks in part to why she became the phenomenon that she did, aside from just being thrilling to watch on the basketball court. Because the number one reason is she's thrilling to watch on the basketball court and plays with an entertaining style that nobody else, I don't think, had before or even has since. But when you look at the dynamics of that, there's always going to be a bunch of factors that come into play that lead to the explosive popularity. And maybe one that is undersold a bit is that she did go to a place that she elevated and put on the map. It wasn't if she had been at UConn, of course she would have won at UConn. I don't even really think that's much of a debate that she would have won at UConn, but she would have been in that pipeline. And that goes for some of the other schools too. And South Carolina has become that under Dawn Staley. Obviously, LSU with Kim Mulkey. I mean, there are great schools out there that have cultivated a ton of talent. And Notre Dame has done a great job developing guard talent, obviously. Arike Ogunbowale was at Notre Dame. We see Hannah Hidalgo and Olivia Miles at Notre Dame right now. So it's not as if Notre Dame couldn't have successfully, gotten Caitlin Clark to where she is now. But I don't know if all of it would have played out quite the same anywhere else, because Iowa obviously has these ardent supporters, and they've proven that during this time period. Not to mention, it allowed Clark to kind of burst onto the scene in a way that maybe wouldn't have happened if she was at the more established program. Because when she bursts on the scene, it's more like, who's this girl from Iowa? Who's this? I mean, I remember seeing that some of those first logo threes when they were getting shared and everything. You got to check out this Caitlin Clark girl from Iowa. And I suppose that leads to a little bit of the America's sweetheart, the Midwestern charm that people point to, which of course leads into her being white. But she is not the first white superstar, right? Like, we've seen white superstars in the WNBA before, but a lot of them went to UConn. Sabrina Ionescu went to Oregon, so that was different. But there's just something about those confluence of factors, the obviously style, flair, and electricity that Clark plays with, the way she carries herself, and then that choice of college. And, the fact that people got to follow it over a number of years, too. I mean, she went to the national championship game and lost, and then obviously went back and lost again. But in that process of going back, she breaks the NCAA scoring record, which is an achievement of great significance. One that eventually I'm sure will be broken, but might take a minute. Secondly, in the process of that, she also led the country in assists and wins player of the year and just all these things that made it all about her as an individual. I mean, it wasn't just her as an individual. People love that Iowa team, and Iowa is going to be, I think, a program of note going forward as a result. But it was very individual to her what happened at Iowa. And I think that's part of the origin story when you really think about it. And a lot of the fans I know that are watching this right now are Iowa fans or came over from Iowa because of that attachment that they got. And look at the attachment to Kate Martin still from that team. Kate Martin, the most popular player, the face of the Golden State Valkyries at this point in time. So I do think that is a significant part of the origin story and the fabric of what Caitlin Clark became. So I thought that was worth sharing and hearing her sort of detail that and discuss Notre Dame and any other various options. But she just said she didn't want to be far from home. I think she said she visited some other schools, but they were too far away. So it's a glimpse into her personality as that homebody that she referenced, but it's a glimpse into her perspective as a player and how she wants to stand on her own too and accomplish her own thing. And I do think that is part of the legend of Caitlin Clark, that she went to a place like Iowa, put Iowa on the map, and then therefore, elevated the profile of the WNBA on the map and across the globe after that. So hearing her lay it out that way, I did think was worth sharing. And I'm sure there are Iowa fans out there who cannot hear enough of her saying good things about being a Hawkeye or reliving any of those memories.